Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating biological mechanics of human growth and, crucially, the role nutrition plays in it. We all know genetics deal you a certain hand when it comes to how tall you might be, right? But how that hand is played, well, that depends heavily on your environment. Specifically, the building blocks you give your body during a very precise window of time can literally make all the difference. We're going to explore the science of how we grow, why we eventually stop, and exactly what fuels the whole shebang.
So, let's just tackle this age-old question right off the bat. Can you increase your height after 18? It's a question searched millions of times, and honestly, the internet is absolutely full of wild claims, stretching routines, and quick fixes. But to get to the real truth, we have to look deep inside the cellular structure of your bones. We need to cut through the myths and understand the actual physiological limits of our skeletal system. Because the real answer, it lies down at the microscopic level.
To make sense of all this complex biology, we've structured this explainer into 4 key parts. We'll start with the biology of growth, then move into why we stop growing, explore the building blocks, and finally, do a bit of a dietary reality check.
All right, part 1, the biology of growth. Let's look at where it all happens.
Think of this as a microscopic construction site. This is where longitudinal growth actually happens. A really dynamic area called the epiphyseal plate. It's essentially a thin layer of cartilage trapped at the ends of your long bones. Right here, local signaling molecules coordinate exactly how bone cells multiply. You have these complex factors, including one that scientists literally, no joke, named Indian hedgehog, acting just like foremen on a building site. They dictate exactly when immature cartilage cells multiply, swell up, and eventually get replaced by hard bone, driving your height upwards.
But beyond those local foremen, you've got hormones acting as the ultimate project managers. Estrogens and androgens silently but powerfully accelerate your skeletal maturation during puberty, usually without you even noticing. It's kind of fascinating because these sex steroids don't just spark that famous pubertal growth spurt, they actually dictate the entire timeline. They orchestrate the maturation of the growth plate, pushing it inevitably towards its final stage. For instance, estrogen is absolutely crucial for bone mineral accrual, but prolonged exposure, that's actually what eventually signals those growth plates to close up shop.
Which brings us to part 2, why we stop growing, the end of height gain.
So you might be wondering, if we have all this incredible cellular machinery constantly building bone and hormones driving it all forward, why do we eventually stop? Why don't we just keep getting taller and taller our whole lives? Well, the stopping process starts with a biological concept called senescence. Simply put, senescence means the growth plate's cellular capacity to divide just gradually exhausts itself over time. It's a structural and functional decline. Think of it like a biological clock ticking down inside your bones. The stem-like cells located in the resting zone of the cartilage have a strictly finite capacity to multiply. As puberty progresses, these cells basically run out of steam. The growth plate shrinks in width, and that window for adding vertical inches starts to permanently close. But how do those very last cartilage cells actually bow out to make way for bone? Interestingly, science is still debating the exact mechanics of when that growth plate completely turns into bone, a process called epiphyseal fusion. Researchers currently think the final cessation of growth happens via one of 4 distinct cellular routes. Could it be apoptosis, neat programmed cell death, or maybe autophagy, where the cell basically consumes itself? Is it transdifferentiation, where cartilage cells literally transform directly into bone cells? Or perhaps hypoxia, where the cells are starved of oxygen? It's a microscopic mystery that scientists are still working to completely unravel.
Just look at the sheer contrast here. On one side, an early pubertal growth plate has these active, plump cells that are neatly organized and constantly dividing to build bone. But on the other side, a late pubertal growth plate is being completely walled off by dense, cortical-like bone. That thick border of bone literally acts as a physical barrier. It cuts off nutrients and permanently closes your growth window. Once your bones reach this stage, your natural longitudinal growth is completely finished.
Okay, let's dive into part 3, the building blocks. This is all about your nutritional foundation.
As we just saw, once that growth window closes, it's closed forever. You cannot reopen it naturally. That is exactly why your nutritional building blocks during childhood and puberty are non-negotiable. Crucially, vitamin D isn't just a vitamin. It's a vital, active hormone in your body. It is absolutely essential for regulating calcium metabolism. During your peak growth periods, having optimal levels of vitamin D allows your intestines to absorb up to 80% of the calcium you consume.
Without this hormonal key, your body simply cannot absorb the massive amounts of calcium required to build your structural foundation, no matter how much you eat.
Now, we basically have two main ways to get this crucial hormone. While our skin is wonderfully designed to create its own vitamin D when exposed to UVB sunlight, modern life kind of gets in the way. Indoor lifestyles, living in higher latitudes, wearing heavy clothing, and, totally valid concerns about skin cancer leading to sunscreen use, all of these severely limit our natural production. Because of this, we really have to actively rely on dietary sources, like fatty fish, liver, or fortified foods to fuel our skeletal development. But since these natural dietary sources aren't exactly super common in an everyday diet, maintaining adequate levels is incredibly challenging.
Which leads us to part 4, a dietary reality check. What exactly are we consuming? We need to take a stark, data-driven look at what modern youth are actually consuming to fuel their genetic potential. When we analyze the nutritional data, it becomes clear that it's not just about, pouring calcium into your body, it's about understanding how different foods interact. If you want to maximize absorption, consuming lactose and certain proteins helps immensely, but actively minimizing absorption reducers like excessive fiber, phytates found in certain grains, and even caffeine is just as critical. Seriously, you could be eating enough calcium, but if you're washing it down with a ton of caffeine, you're literally blocking its absorption and flushing those vital building blocks away.
When we look at actual longitudinal dietary studies, the numbers are, quite frankly, incredibly concerning. Shockingly, research reveals that childhood calcium intake can be a staggering 54% below the recommended levels. Just think about that. During their most critical, rapid growth window, right when the skeletal scaffolding is being built at maximum speed, over half of the essential building materials are just missing from the construction site.
And sadly, this nutritional shortfall only gets worse as kids age. By the time these individuals reach young adulthood, their calcium intake drops to an astonishing 77% below recommended levels. This severe deficit doesn't just potentially stunt their final height, it severely jeopardizes their peak bone mass and density, practically setting the stage for much weaker bones later in life.
Furthermore, the data highlights a very specific dietary link. Avoiding dairy during childhood is strongly tied to negative outcomes. Children with a long history of avoiding cow's milk actually end up with significantly lower total bone mineral content and noticeably shorter stature compared to their milk-drinking peers. By skipping milk, they're missing out on one of the most bioavailable combinations of calcium and vitamin D right when their rapidly growing bodies demanded the absolute most.
So, let's summarize everything we've covered today. First, critical growth windows are strictly finite. They are completely dictated by the biological senescence of the growth plate. Second, your ultimate height is basically your genetic potential, plus the environmental fuel you provide during that open window. And third, calcium and vitamin D are the essential, non-negotiable building blocks. Fulfilling your potential requires perfectly timing the delivery of these nutritional materials before your body's biological scaffolding is permanently dismantled.
I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to reflect upon. Did your childhood habits and diet truly give you the building blocks to reach your full genetic potential? Did you reach your absolute maximum height, or did nutritional shortfalls leave a few inches on the table? It's a fascinating look at how deeply our environment interacts with our biology. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and stay curious.